This video is going to describe how to install the BingoAirsoft Designs MAC-10 Polarstar Jack Gearbox Replacement Kit. Let me describe some of the parts that come with the kit. This is a Tokyo Marui MAC-10. It's not included in the kit, but it's going to be used as the demonstration gun here. But the kit includes the custom jack engine with the MAC-10 chassis that holds the engine. It'll have the FCU and wire harness, a small battery that fits inside the gun, quick disconnect plug, and these two extra plates. This is the upper plate, and I'll show you where that goes, and a lower plate which contains the mini circuit board, the full auto switch, which is right here, and the trigger harness, which are these two wires right here. And so this video will show how we take apart the MAC-10 and then install these parts. We'll start by first showing you how to disassemble the MAC-10 so we can get at the internals. The first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that the gun is on safe. You can't disassemble it when it's on fire, so slide your safe switch back, and the first thing we're going to do is take out this screw here. You'll need a 1.5 hex wrench to remove this screw. So we'll just take that screw out, and it takes the trigger pin out. You can push that through. It comes out on the other side. Set that aside. The next thing you're going to want to do is actually remove the front cover, and you do that by pushing in the front cover release. It may be left or right because this is reversible, this pin, and the front assembly comes off. From there, we actually need to remove this pin that's up here in the front, and you remove this pin by holding this lever down and then pushing the pin through. Sometimes it'll actually just drop right out, so we'll just hold this lever down and the pin comes out, the locking pin. Now once that's done, the Mac, I want to unfold your stock so it's not covering the top part here. The MAC-10 upper comes out by just sliding it forward about 2 millimeters and then lifting it straight up. So you just slide it forward and then it comes straight up like this. And of course, to lock it back in place, is you bring it down and then slide it backward. It actually catches on these little indentations that are on the upper. Okay, so we're going to need to make some modifications to both the upper and the lower to get the engine in place. Let me start by, actually we're going to start with a simpler part first. We're going to modify the upper. So the upper, inside here, you'll see has these two plastic plates that are used to cover the sliding mechanism here, which gives you access to the hop-up. These plates actually get in the way of allowing you to fit the FCU and the battery in the gun. So we're going to actually remove these and replace it with this 3D printed upper plate, which takes up a lot less space. So there are 4 screws that you need to remove. So it's helpful to have a #1 screwdriver, Phillips screwdriver, with a long, an extra long #1 Phillips screwdriver, which will be useful for taking out some other parts of the gun as well. So we'll just take these 4 screws out, save the screws because we're going to reuse them. You'll take this plate, it'll have the shiny side down, and you'll actually put this in place of where these 2 pieces used to be, and then screw that in using just 3 screws. You don't need to use all 4. Okay, that plate is there to protect the FCU from being damaged by this mechanism here. When this slides back now, it's covered and it's protected by that plate. That's all you need to do with the upper, is just take these out, go ahead and set the upper aside. Now for the lower, we actually need to get the existing engine out, and we're going to replace this piece here as well. So the easiest way to get the engine out is actually to take this part off, and then the engine and the barrel assembly will come out as well. And this is held in place by 3 screws. There's 1 screw here on each side of the hop-up, and then there's 1 screw here in the front, which you can access through this cutout that they have in the lower plate. So we'll start by just taking these 2 screws out. They're very small screws, so be careful not to lose them, because we're actually going to be reusing these screws as well. So it might help to have some pliers handy to pick these screws out so that you don't get lost in the gun. There you go. And then we want to take this screw out It's going to be hard to see, but if you peer down into the gun, you'll see that there's a screw at the bottom of this hole. And just get your screwdriver down to it, and you can pull this screw out. It's a little bit longer than the other two. Once that's removed, this assembly actually lifts straight out of the gun. And you want to detach your fuse right here. So take this plastic piece, set that down for a second. We're going to come back to that. Take out the fuse, set that aside. And now to take out the engine, the old gearbox, you can actually just lift it up and detach the wires from each side. There's one wire attached here on the side. It actually goes onto this copper tab right here, so you detach that. And there's another wire right here which went onto this copper tab, which you already detached when you pulled this piece out of the gun. So at this point you can actually just lift both of these things out. The barrel and hop-up assembly and the motor assembly. The gearbox. You're done with the gearbox. You can set that aside now. Alright, back to this piece. We're actually going to reuse this end cap piece that's right here. So there's two screws at the top here, and you're going to want to take these two screws out. Once you remove these two screws, this front piece comes off, just like that. And it exposes these copper wire traces and so forth. Now you can take this piece and set it aside. You won't be using that either. But we will be using this front piece that's right here. Okay? Now before we actually reassemble the gun and install the engine, you're going to want to drill a hole right here in the back to allow the air line to exit. Alright, to drill the hole in the back, you'll actually want to take another piece out of the gun so it doesn't get lost. Down inside here is the locking mechanism for the stock. This piece actually just lifts straight out. You can take this out and see that it has this little spring here. Be careful not to lose the spring. Set this aside, and when you do this, the whole stock will just slide right out the back. Again, set that aside as well. And so the hole that needs to be back here, put on this back plate, needs to be approximately 1 7/8 inch from the top piece right here. So measure 1 7/8 to the center of this hole, and the diameter of the hole is approximately 3/8 in diameter, and put it just basically dead center between the two in the middle of the gun. So this hole needs to be fairly large, and you'll see why when we actually have to install the engine. The larger you make it, the easier it'll be to install the engine, because it's a tight fit to get the air line to fit through that hole in the back. So once the hole is drilled, we're going to install the lower plate and the engine. A couple things you want to have prepared before you do that. I actually like to leave the stock in place on the gun. It helps balance it so the gun can actually sit upright. If you remove this stock, it's unbalanced and it actually tips forward. It won't stay upright. So it actually is nice to have this left in place just to give it balance so you could work on it upright like this. The second thing is make sure your selector switch is set to semi before you install this lower. And you'll see why and how it activates the full auto switch. Alright, now to install the gearbox replacement kit, we're going to reinstall the hop up and barrel and this front plate that goes on top of all of that. So we'll start by taking the hop up and barrel and set that back into its seat. It'll fit right in there. Sort of keep that little that one half of the fuse. The other half went out with this piece, so you don't actually use that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to install this in its place. The first thing you'll do is take this end piece that you removed and push it onto here, right onto the end cap of this 3D printed part. And then you'll just use the same two screws that were there before and reinstall those screws. Let me go ahead and put these screws back in. They're pretty small, but go ahead and tighten these down. Tighten them down until this piece is flush with the plastic piece, but don't over tighten them, because you can actually strip the plastic, of course, since it's pretty soft plastic that you're screwing these screws into. So they just need to be snug. You don't have to over torque them. Alright, now that this piece is on here, you can actually take this metal pin, which replaces the fuse, and set that right into the place where the fuse used to be. And then you can basically lower this into place. And now we're going to reinstall the 3 screws that hold this in place. There's also a little cutout here at the top for this wire to come from the fuse. So it goes into that little cutout right here at the top. Alright, so let's put these 3 screws back in. The 2 shorter screws go here on these little tabs. Back into the metal part of the hop-up support block. Once again, just emphasizing, don't over tighten any of these screws. They're not structural, they don't need to be really tight. Just snug is all you need to do. And then you have this open area up here, and this screw will go right into the front. Alright, again, just gently tighten that down. Okay, it was necessary to replace these 2 pieces in order to provide enough room up here in the front for the FCU and the battery, and you'll see that at the end of the video when we finally install everything together. Okay, now this last tab piece here will connect onto this metal or this copper prong tab that's out here. So have the wire go through this little slot. There's already a slot right here, and then just gently attach this tab onto that, and we'll come back. The wire harness from the engine will actually hold that in place. Okay, this wire here and the one that goes to the fuse comprise the trigger linkage, and that plugs into the green header that's on this little circuit board that's right here. This little switch here is the full auto switch. You can see that's activated by this piece coming up and activating that switch when you turn it to full auto, just like that. This moves. This switch plugs into this lower header that's down here. It's actually blue, but it's on the other side, so you really can't see it, but it's blue. Right here there's one header left that's black, and that actually connects to the solenoid on the jack engine. Now before you put the engine in, also don't forget to reinstall the locking mechanism. So that just drops right back into place into the gun right here. Make sure the spring stays right there. Alright, now that the lock is in there, we're going to go ahead and install the engine. Now the trick to doing this is you have to bend the air hose 90 degrees. And the wire harness again goes out the left side of the engine. You want to line the nose of the engine up with the hop-up, and then you're going to guide it back down using the airline. So you push the airline through, and you see how that gets bent like that? And it's basically got the back end up in the air there. You sort of guide this down and put the nose, let's see if I can get a good camera angle here so you can see this, put the nose of the engine into the hop-up. You should be able to see that, how that goes in like that. Now just by doing that, you just keep pulling down on this airline, and it'll actually just lower the engine into place. Just sort of wiggle it around to make sure it seats cleanly between the locking piece for the stock, and there's rails down at the bottom. Again, this comes out on the left-hand side of the engine. There you go. It just kind of goes in. Now it won't sit flat because there's a spring underneath it for the locking mechanism. The upper actually holds that in place. Now you get this, run it through that same slot that's right up here at the front. It's got to go through that little slot, and then plug this in to the black header that's right there, and just kind of push the wires down and out of the way. At this point the engine is now installed, and all we have to do is reassemble the upper onto here. So take the upper, which we previously put the plate in there. Actually, before we do that, you're going to want to make sure the wire harness is plugged in. So take the wire harness and plug that into its connector. You don't have to have the FCU attached, so let's go ahead and take the FCU off. Attach the wire harness. Take this piece, remember it goes down basically straight, just off to the offset to the front just a little bit before you do it. Now you want to check and make sure you don't pinch any wires right along here against this tab and switch. Check on this side as well that there's no wires getting pinched anywhere. And take this and you just basically push it down. Once you push it down, then push it backward, and you'll hear it click. Now it's basically locked in place. All right, then you'll want to reinstall this pin. You just pop that in there, push this lever down here at the bottom, and the pin goes in. And you can see it actually only, once it's in place, it only pushes out partially to one side. So you're going to want to push that out, which will now allow the front end to go onto the gun. Okay, now that the engine's installed, the next and remaining, the last part here is to get the FCU. I'm going to move this stock out of the way. Get the FCU and the battery installed in here. And there's actually a trick to get that to fit properly. So you're going to want to follow this installation method pretty closely. You're going to attach the FCU to the wire harness, and then you want to have the wire harness wire go down on this left hand side in this opening here, because you're going to have to fit the battery on the right hand side. So you guide this wire down and you put the connector in first. So it makes this bend just like that. Connector goes in first with the wire on the left hand side. Okay, push that in. Probably not all the way, because at this point you're going to take the battery and you're going to attach the battery here and get that in as far as it'll seat, and then you'll take the battery and you're going to insert that here on the right hand side. Now this is going to take a little bit of finagling to make sure that it fits. That's why that plate had to get removed, just to make sure that there's enough room for this battery to sit in there. And sometimes you actually have to reseat this, because you want this FCU as far to the left as possible. So make sure that this wire harness goes underneath it. Alright, these tiny little guns have so little room in them. Alright, the FCU is completely against the left hand side. Now I can get this battery, and that'll seat a little bit further in there. And then you're going to want to take these connectors and sort of push them out of the way. Alright. These connectors will actually fit up into this space on the top cover here. But then you'll want to take the top cover, seat it on here, and it should go in and seat cleanly. You see how that just went in without hardly any resistance? If you have to push it hard, or if it's very difficult, go back and reseat the pieces. But you can see the battery's on this side, the FCU is right here, completely against this. The wires are underneath, and these wires are on top. You're going to have to keep following that same method to insert this cleanly. And once that's in, you can push that in, and that locks it in place. Alright, just about done. Last thing to do here is take the pin, which goes in on the left hand side, and it has an indentation on it. There's a flat side of this pin that goes forward. Push that in. Take this small screw and screw this in to the pin. There you go. And actually, since I plugged in the battery, the gun is actually on. So you take it off the safe, go to fire. You can probably hear that there. And you can hear it go to full. We'll take the airline attachment, hook up the quick disconnect plug, and then I'm going to hook up some air, and we can actually see if this works. Alright, there you go. That's how you install the gearbox replacement kit in the MAC-10.